It's the AI, artificial intelligence. I always thought it should be SI, supreme intelligence, but I guess somewhere along the line they decided to the word artificial, and that's okay with me. That's up to them. It's a massive industry. We're leading China. We're leading everybody.
The future of American warfare is here, and it's spelled AI. As technologies advance, so do our adversaries. But here at the War Department, we are not sitting idly by. Under the leadership of President Trump, America will lead the charge on this technological transformation by revolutionizing.
Welcome, friends. Today we are going to talk about how global power is going to get redistributed over the coming decades, maybe as soon as the next 10, 15 years, thanks to AI. Now, what is the occasion for this? Is that the US has just released a strategy paper for AI in the military. That is how the War Department is going to incorporate AI in every feature, in every force and wing of the defense forces, in every unit and weapon system, including the legacy systems, will be redesigned and reimagined for an AI-infused future warfare. Now, firstly, why is this happening? It's been happening for a year, virtually, since Trump has come to power. And the process will continue very fast during his term. The reason being that, see, Trump's base consists of two components. One is the traditional MAGA base of Americans from the middle and lower classes who want a redistribution of spending towards them rather than towards foreign wars, and who want the elites not to take the entire pie. The second group which supports Trump are the tech bros. These tech bros are the ones who run Silicon Valley and these large corporations. Some of them are running small startups as well. And they are now deeply into AI. So there's an AI boom going on. The US stock market is booming, all of that. People are calling it a bubble. No matter what you call it, trillions of dollars is being invested in building up AI, including the GPUs, the chips, and the data centers, and what have you. Similarly, these tech bros have been big funders of the Trump administration's politics. People like Peter Thiel, all kinds of people like, and you know the companies also, Palantir, Anduril. So Elon Musk himself. So these people want a return, and Trump has promised that he is going to invest big in AI, and the military is one of the big sources of spending. About $1 trillion budget, a large amount of it is spent on R&D and weapons acquisitions. And also the old way of acquiring weapons systems was considered too slow. So this is part of Trump's ideology also, building America, making America great again. You need to start building faster, and you need to have less cost overruns, less wasteful money, and more bang for the buck. This is what AI companies like Anduril, Palantir are promising, that look, we will not only produce fast, but we will produce in large numbers on production lines, and we will use existing infrastructure. Like in the Second World War, it was that car factories and tractor factories were used to produce. And what you're seeing is the First World War, but I was talking about the Second World War and how these production lines were transformed into making, for example, a carrier in 15 days. For example, making a B-24 bomber in less than 24 hours. That kind of transformation, so that regular car companies in America, Ford, etc., can start producing AI-infused weapon systems. Now, why now, and what is the pressure? Well, the feeling is that whoever takes the lead here will rule the world. That is, in the coming decades, United States wants to maintain the same position that it has had for almost 100 years in the international system. That is the Optimus Prime, the number one. It doesn't want to be second to anybody. It fears that deeply. And they feel that the Trump administration and Pete Hegseth, etc., they feel that they have been held back by Biden, which is not true, by the administration, that they have not been able to rip as fast as they could because of human rights and uh, diversity and inclusion policies, and due to antitrust policies of breaking up big industries. And they believe that in China, for example, none of these constraints exist, which is not true. China is big on antitrust, and that's the reason they broke up Alibaba. They are also into antitrust because they don't want people to have so much power that they can challenge the Communist Party. And China is also into human rights. For example, one of their top scientists who tried to edit genes for babies, gene-edited babies, was sent to prison for a few years for having violated it on human rights counts. So it's not true, but they believe that we have been held back. And this is also what a kind of a backlash of white males who feel that we have been discriminated, that Pete Hegseth is part of that, Trump is part of that. And so they say that, no, even on AI, we don't want any limits. But my saying to you is that this would have inevitably happened, even if there was no backlash against DEI, etc. Why? Because technology creates its own pressures. Such are the pressures of technological development that if you see the First World War, it begins without any of the principal weapons. It began without tanks. First World War created tanks. First World War created chemical gas weapons. First World War created aircrafts. There were no aircrafts used in warfare before that. The First World War led to the pressure of submarines being used. So, because if you didn't do that, you would get left behind and the other side would win. So both sides invented the same weapons, whether it was the British and the French and the Americans, or on the other side, the Germans. They invented the same weapons. Because if you didn't have them, you would lose out. It is the same pressure that technology is now creating with respect to AI. If you don't have AI-infused weapons, your speed of warfare will go down. AI weapons fight at an incredible speed. I cannot explain to you. I'll do a separate video on technology, AI technology, etc. But the speed at which they fight, plus the kill chain, therefore, has no humans quite often. That is, decisions about killing are made by individuals. And you can see that already in Ukraine. Ukraine has already made semi-independent drones, which can themselves identify and fire at a target. Now, of course, this creates ethical issues, and we'll do something separately on those ethical issues. But for now, what you have to understand is whoever has speed in war always wins. I'll give you one example. England was the leading naval power in the first around 1910. But the first Sea Lord, that is Winston Churchill, was the Minister of the Navy. He found out that, look, oil-powered battleships are much faster than coal-powered. England already had invested huge amounts and had the largest coal-fired battleship fleet in the world. But he overnight made the decision that we have to switch as soon as possible to oil, just for speed, so that the ships would have greater speed. So important, so critical is speed. Speed is everything, we have heard it from Napoleon, the god of war, as Clausewitz calls him. So AI is going to create speed, and so the pressures that the technology creates would have inevitably led to this. It's not just Trump or Hegseth doing it, the next president. And when it would have happened would be when they would have found out that we are behind in the race. That's when the panic would have started. But now already this crazy race has started. And America, being the technology leader in AI anyway, and having the most amount of venture capital and financial capital in the world, is going to go all out. And as you can see, some of these weapon systems, they look like space age stuff. And it literally is. It looks like it's from sci-fi movies. And many of the founders are themselves big fans of sci-fi. The founder of Anduril, Palantir, Musk himself, etc. And they love reading things like Isaac Asimov and all of those guys. So coming back to our point, how will this change the distribution of power? Okay, so distribution of power right now in the world, I'm going to show you how the defense expenditures for large countries or groups span out, and also their GDPs and their per capita GDPs. Have a look at the defense expenditures, and you will get an idea of who is where right now in the power distribution and how this is going to move in the future. Now AI requires so much money, even the weapon systems, that and so much advanced technology, that it's going to create a totally different world order. That is, the rich countries are going to become now so much more powerful. Why? Because earlier, even if you were rich, you would have to send a few soldiers to fight in a poor country like, say, Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. And so a few of your soldiers and citizens would be lost, and there would be some political blowback at home. Now, because robots and autonomous vehicles will be doing most of the fighting, you don't have to worry. There's no political blowback. So the power of rich countries as compared to poor countries will increase a lot. They can easily threaten them. For example, no need for a manned fighter aircraft. You will send autonomous fighters, and you will be at the back. Your aircraft will be manned aircraft will be at the back. At the front will be these wingmen or robotic. Same thing for submarines and ships. A mothership, and then all of these being controlled from there. Same thing for land warfare. Killer robots, and China too has developed these killer robots. So it's going to be incredibly good for rich countries who have this technology, and really bad for the poorer ones. But coming back again to the power distribution, if you have a look at a variation of their GDPs, you will realize that, hey, US is way ahead at $31 trillion. Okay. And then the next is Europe at about 26.5 trillion. Okay, Europe. Next is China at about 19-20 trillion. Okay, and then way below are India and Russia. India is about 3.7 trillion. Russia is at 2.5 trillion. Okay. Now, if you look at their powers from this graph, you will say, hey, Europe is not that powerful despite having such a big GDP. And Russia, despite having such a small GDP, is quite powerful. Okay. Why is that? Let me explain. If you have a look at this chart of defense expenditures, you will get a better idea of how power is distributed. So American defense expenditure is around 900 to $1 trillion. Europe's is about 700 billion, 690, 700 billion. So about 30% less than America. Next is China at about 300 billion. Okay. After that is Russia at 150 and India at 83. Let me explain this a bit. China's power is much more than its 300 billion shows you. Why? Because in China, the salary of the soldier is much less, and the salary for R&D scientists and the salary for weapons acquisition manufacturers is much less. So this 300 billion gives you a much bigger bang. Okay. Plus, much of it is hidden. That is, China spends as much on its defense as it does on its internal security. Okay. So China's power is much more than it reveals. And Russia's power, even though it had a smallest GDP, its defense expenditure is quite substantial. That's of course because of war also, but even without war, right now it's at 8% of GDP, that's 150 billion. But even otherwise, it would be at around 4-5%. But Russia benefited a lot also because it has a lot of legacy systems from the Soviet Union, who invested a lot in military hardware and R&D. So Russia has benefited from all that R&D, scientists, and all that hardware, which was already built by the Soviet Union and built on that. But that advantage is slowly dissipating. Okay, so it's because of its low GDP, its power in this international system is going to decline. And my theory is that Russia will have to ally itself with China in order to maintain itself in the race for AI. Because only China has the kind of bulk and strength required to invest heavily in AI. So Russia, despite its huge size on the map, is going to become an appendage of China. And this will create a problem for India, because India is dependent on Russia for weapons. Okay. But worry not, there is a third block coming up. That is Europe. If you look at Europe's GDP, it tells you that at 26.5 trillion, it is just a little bit below the US GDP. In per capita income, it is of course much below. US per capita is near $90,000. Europe's per capita is around 45, so half. But still, because Europe's population is larger, Europe's population is about 500 million, and America's is 335. That is, Europe's population is so much larger that it's going to be able to produce a larger GDP. So it produces 26.5 trillion. Now, this large GDP can anytime be monetized into war capacity, war fighting capacity. If you look at the defense expenditure, it's 650 billion. It's actually it's 700 billion almost. This goes mostly in salaries and a little bit goes in weapon systems. But this can be mobilized into making AI, because Europe has technology, only it has not invested fully in AI. But if it makes the decision, it can. So Europe is a latent power which can very quickly develop into a large military power and into a large AI-driven power. Of course, in military terms, it takes a while. It takes about 10 or more years to completely mobilize. So it'll take it a while, but in the next 10, 15 years, you will see if Europe continues on its path, it will become a big military power as well. And it will have all the AI technology. Moreover, I have a feeling that Europe is going to ally with the East Asian group of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, because they also have money, GDP, they also have technology. So together they will ally, and that will become a third grouping on which India can then rely for weapon systems. I think this is the way power distribution is going to work. Okay. Of course, Russia and China also don't trust each other very well. So I'm not sure how that equation will work, whether China will trust Russia with all of its technology, because China is careful and they both don't trust each other fully. Even Russia doesn't fully share most of its advanced weapons with China. Its most advanced weapons I'm talking about. Okay. So now it's also possible that for now, America is growing rapidly and a leader in AI, and it may continue this way. But it's also possible that some president after Trump might again try to ally with Europe and East Asia, and that might become again a big super bloc. But even without that, America will definitely be the leader of this pack, the way things are going. And number two will be China, I think, unless China has some economic setbacks and kind of its growth engine fails. And number three will be Europe plus East Asia. So I'm foreseeing a complete redistribution of power, not at the top spot, but at the below spots, and away from the global south. Even the power to launch kind of guerrilla warfare, etc., what is called the weapons of the weak, will be curtailed. Because earlier we used to think, okay, these big countries are powerful, but the poorer countries are also not powerless. That is, if they are ready to pay a high price, like Vietnam was in terms of casualties, if Iraq or Afghanistan, then they can to some extent resist. But now that power of resistance will also be gone. So the only power will be the moral power of their internal public opinion for the rich countries. That is, as Trump says, I'm curtailed only by my own morality and my own mind and views. That is the situation that we're going to have very soon. So it's a fearful situation. There is a lot of money going into this area. There is a transformation of the battlefield happening, the speed and the robotics and the manpower involved. And there is a transformation of global power associated with this. So I know these are very worrying trends, and we'll come back to that in future episodes. So you just keep watching, and I'll come to implications for different countries. I'll come to how one should go about thinking about the ethical issues, and what about the fascinating new technology coming, how the battlefield is going to be transformed. But this first one was just a big picture overlay of how the global situation, the global order is going to shape up in the next maybe 10, 12, 15 years. And, just as people before the First World War could not imagine how war would be transformed, and just as people before the Second World War could not imagine that, look, between 1914 and 1960s, say in that 45, 50-year period, you had nuclear weapons and jet aircraft and missiles and all kinds of radars and sonars and all kinds of space technology, rockets. Similarly, we currently cannot imagine fully what the transformation is going to be over the next 10, 15, 20 years. But all of this is going to get, as I said, instead of 50, 60 years, it is going to get compressed into a much shorter time. So keep watching and see you soon.
The future of American warfare is here, and it's spelled AI. As technologies advance, so do our adversaries. But here at the War Department, we are not sitting idly by. Under the leadership of President Trump, America will lead the charge on this technological